everybody, we're back for another episode of Dissecting Diddy, our weekly update on what is being called the trial of the decade. I'm your co-host, Jay Dow, along with Nicole Johnson, and we have a very special guest this week, the one and only Kendis Gibson, our esteemed anchor
I,
on
I
the
am I am
611 News team. How's that for an
I am
intro?
I am
Hi,
humbled to
Kendis.
be hello,
Hi,
great to see
Jay.
you. And can we
Hey,
begin
everybody.
by giving props to this award-winning team? Both of y'all winning moral awards this week.
We appreciate
Congratulations
that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
for your
that.
outstanding work that you guys have done. So congratulations. I,
Thank
Well,
I'm
you.
I'm
so
humbled to be a part of this
Uh,
trio with y'all.
okay, well, we appreciate that, but
Thank
I
you.
can't even win a Starbucks gift award.
Uh,
you're a winner in our eyes. You're a winner in our eyes.
I'm trying to make sure these awards can translate to some money,
Oh, uh-oh. See, that's a whole
Show
other
me the
conversation.
money.
That's a whole other conversation.
Where the
Let's
money
get right. Let's get
reside,
right
where the
to it.
money reside.
Let's get right to it because this was an unbelievably busy week at trial, right? So I think we had Mia, who that's an alias, a former personal assistant for Diddy, on the witness stand most recently, and before that, the blockbuster witness of the week was Capricorn Clark, another former personal assistant who, in the opinion of many, connected a lot of the dots for the prosecution in its effort to make this racketeering conspiracy case. She bolstered the arguments and the accounts of both Cassie Ventura and other people who got up on the stand who talked about their experience in working for Diddy, including um, someone who did not work for Diddy, but who was connected to Cassie and in the industry itself,
Kid
Scott
Cudi.
Mescudi, Kid Cudi. So, I mean, Kendis, we asked you to join us as our special guest this week because you read the transcripts. You know, you're paying attention to everything that's happening in court.
Yeah.
There are a lot of anchors who just get up there and just read the prompter, but I see you reading those transcripts, putting in the work. You're doing the homework, so you know more than so many people about what's happening in the day to day. What was your impression of Capricorn's testimony?
I mean, Capricorn was the witness that Cassie was not. Capricorn was able to connect the violent side of Diddy, at least according to her testimony, and connect it to a greater conspiracy, a greater network. And this guy would try to get everybody else that was within his circle to take part in the sort of criminal acts that he tried to engage with, including taking out Kid Cudi. And I felt that with a lot of the testimony that I read and the transcripts that I read, that the defense did not really have a way of really knocking down Capricorn. They tried their best to say that that Capricorn had a crush on Diddy some 20 years ago, and that
She's a scorned
maybe
woman.
exactly, and maybe that was the reason why they did not, why she's coming back for Diddy now in this case. But nah, that, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I'm not a lawyer, that seemed like a very weak case. But it was a very pivotal week 3 here in the trial, because they got away for the most part from the domestic violence stuff. They got away from a messy witness, which, let's admit, Cassie was, for the prosecution. And now you had these folks who didn't necessarily have an axe to grind, and they were coming out there and they were connecting the dots for the prosecution this week.
Why did
Whether
you
or
think
not the
Cassie
jury
was,
accepts that, we'll know.
Why did you
But
think Cassie was a quote unquote
messy witness. I guess because she confirmed that she was a willing participant in some of the freak off events, that she went along with it. She booked some of the sex workers to participate.
That part.
Yeah, and then, she loved him. She would do whatever he asked her to do out of love. I guess that's pretty messy. And it takes you away from, fragile trauma victim, even though we saw the video, so we know she is a victim of domestic violence. But just to go back to what Kendis said about Kid Cudi, my issue was, even with this testimony and the prosecution trying to connect the dots here. They talked about his vehicle being bombed. They talked about the break-in at his home, but there's no confirmation that Sean Diddy Combs participated in that.
So,
and let's make a clarification. We've been
No
hearing
evidence.
the term bomb the 9/11. I'm not sure if you all saw the actual evidence photos, but it was more like an attempt of dropping this 40-ounce old English bottle that was converted into a makeshift Molotov cocktail.
Yeah,
And
so not so much
dropped,
bomb.
it was
and
dropped into the top of the 9/11, the cloth top, and it burned the seat. It burned the seat. It didn't. The whole car was not torched.
and can I just
want
as
to
a
make that
cultural
clarification.
standpoint, why did it have to be an old English bottle?
Malt liquor.
Kendis, you digress.
Why did it have to be a malt liquor?
You digress.
I will say, because I've been speaking with some of the lawyers that we've had on our air, Lisa Bonner and such, for today, and to your point, and Nicole, in that nobody has connected Diddy there. What she is waiting for, and what a lot of the lawyers are waiting and hoping from a prosecution standpoint, is that some of the security guards, some of the bodyguards, that they will testify, and they will be able to connect the dots, and maybe they'll be allowed to testify without admitting their own guilt and or getting in any sort of trouble. I like the legal term right now, but that's what they're anticipating and hoping that the prosecution will have over the next couple of weeks to help connect a lot of those dots and place Diddy in some of these locations.
Let me circle back to Capricorn Clark's testimony and Kendis, your point that the defense really couldn't do anything. It's important to note that for many witnesses who are very compelling and powerful, there isn't much that a defense team can do to negate that testimony. Often it's just enough to try to mitigate what is being. So if you can't completely discredit that witness, if you can't completely strip that witness of their credibility, often what you are able to do is plant seeds. And one legal expert that I spoke with at the courthouse told me that what we may have seen was a play by the defense team in cross-examining Capricorn Clark was to plant seeds for the sentencing phase, just in case there is a guilty verdict, by using Capricorn's testimony where they were able to elicit comments where she was very speaking in a very flattering way about Combs, in saying that she learned a lot, that she respected his hustle. In also the comments where she did have a crush, she teared up near the end of her testimony where she was talking about, there were a lot of good times. I learned a lot. Basically it wasn't all a horror show. So that may be an effort by the defense team to, on the back end, hedge their bets to knock down some of the years off a sentence if it does come to that. Not saying that it would, but those could be some of the mitigating factors in the sentencing guidelines, because federal sentencing guidelines are much different than state, and the judge has to take that into account. You already know that Fed time, you have to serve 80% of that.
Yes.
So every effort is made, if there is a guilty verdict, if there is some kind of deal struck in any federal case, to focus on sentencing so that that person doesn't have to do all of the time. Also, the defense team, their job is to make sure that there is a little sliver of reasonable doubt. It doesn't have to be a slam dunk.
Just a sliver.
And so, yes, the prosecution just has to prove that there were 2 of those predicate crimes in place over the course of 10 years. And Diddy does not have to be participating, as you said, Kendis, but the simple awareness of some of those crimes, according to some of the experts that I've spoken with, is enough. But we're in week 3 of an 8-week trial, and the defense team has yet to put on its case. So just a reminder that everything that we're hearing now is just one side of the story.
And Jay, you've been inside that courtroom for all of this, right? right after Kid Cudi's testimony, the defense went in to move for dismissal, and I thought that was pretty
Standard,
bold.
standard. At every point, you're always going to have the defense team trying to throw it out. We want to let's throw out this testimony. Let's throw out the motion to dismiss, right? Because on
Yeah.
the whim that there is some kind of legal basis for that, the judge can't ignore it. So you're going to see that time and time again. As soon as the defense thinks there's a whiff of a possibility to get something thrown out or the case thrown out, they're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jay, what has the environment been in the court over the course of the last 3 weeks? I know that yesterday Diddy's kids were still in court. They were there in force on day one. What has the environment been like? Because we don't get to see what it is like.
I know that's what's so tough about federal cases, right? No cameras, just the accounts of the people in the courtroom. You know, Diddy has been interacting with his family members. He turns around, he talks to them occasionally. You know, I love you. The heart. He's doing all of that. He appears to be in good spirits. He is attentive. He's listening. He's communicating with his lawyers, passing notes along. He is not a passenger in his own defense, not by any means.
And I heard that the defense is asking, or maybe they put forward a motion to have more time with Diddy, to have more time, because they're saying they can't discuss the case, they can't go over evidence and so forth because of the restrictions at the Metropolitan Detention Center. So I believe just recently they asked the judge to give them a special conference room for some extended time so that they can really sit with him and go over things. I've never been to federal lockups, thank goodness. But I do know that it is a strict environment. You know, there's very little movement, and I don't know how they're able to prepare because he is in federal custody.
And Nicole, because of that request, some lawyers are speculating that it's possible he might get on the stand. I still am fairly doubtful of it, but they were saying that they were asking for that extra time with him in order to prep him more for him to take the stand.
So 2 quick points, and then I'm going to leave it to you two to offer the last 2 points, and then we'll wrap. So when you have a client who's in custody, especially in federal custody, any lawyer will tell you it's incredibly difficult to, defend for that client, because you're always trying to keep that client in the loop. Their access to evidence, their access to the case materials, it's always an uphill battle. Sorry about that. It's always an uphill battle. And when you have a client who is, very vocal and wanting to participate in their defense, it just makes it that much harder. Kendis, to your point, will he take the stand? There's been so much debate about that. All I'm going to say is if he takes the stand, I think I'm going to have to, that's throwing me back to 4 a.m. arrivals at the courthouse, which I am not looking forward to. Not with 5 o'clock live shots on the back end. So,
and I read an article.
I would just rather see him sit there
and nod his head and interact with his attorney and send hearts to his family.
All right, so
I heard
Nicole,
that.
Y'all take it away, and then we'll wrap it up.
Suge Knight, who's been a total enemy of Diddy, weighed in from his own prison situation, being incarcerated since 2018, saying that he should take the stand to just humanize things and just, give the jurors his perspective. And Suge Knight is offering support. That's shocking.
That's a gamble.
Well, my last take is not legal. It's not serious. It is. I took note of Jimmy Kimmel last night. Went on the streets of LA with the artists sketching Diddy and asked all these people who they thought that was. And it ranged from Al Roker to several white people.
Was that a commentary on the sketch itself and the sketch artist?
Well, it's also a commentary on the sketch, but also a commentary on how gray and how different he looks at this point.
I've seen some of those sketches. Very sketchy.
Yeah, come
Very
on now.
sketchy.
Those are our only images from trial. And they're
Yeah, I
That's
working
all
know.
we
hard.
got.
I
Working
know. They
hard.
might. I know. Very sketchy.
Well,
That's all I have to say. But this is, highly watched, highly visible. Everyone's glued in, and we'll see. Week 4, right?
week
Week
4
four
coming up.
coming up. All right.
Kendis, I want to thank you for jumping in with us and taking
Thank
the
you both.
time. We appreciate it. Nicole, as always, I'll see
Thank
you
you.
next week. For Nicole Johnson, Kendis Gibson, I'm Jay Dow. Dissecting Diddy, your weekly update to the trial of the decade. Maybe it becomes the trial of the century when it's all
That's
over.
right.
We will see you next week.
Next week.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
All
See
right,
ya.
Bye-bye.
bye.